One for Mike.
And he stuck it right up them. That's what you did. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
Welcome back to 5 o'clock somewhere. I am your host, Taylor Stone, and milestone episode today because episode number 10, 1 to 10, it's been a bit of a journey, but a great one. We've had a few great guests on so far, but as a milestone episode, I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to get one of Australia's biggest professional big wave surfers, Mark Mathews. Thank you for coming on 5 o'clock somewhere. I really appreciate your time, brother.
Mate, thanks for having me on, Taylor. I'm pumped for a little chat. Should be fun.
Absolutely. Look, mate, you're up in the Goldie. I'm down in Melbourne, and it's always dismal down here in Melbourne. But one nice day of weather, and it's game on. It's hell for leather. Everyone's out and straight down the beach. And regardless of how the waves are, we're doing our best to surf a 2-foot choppy swell. But how is it up in the Goldie at the moment?
We have pretty small waves, like it's pretty average at the moment. This is kind of the worst. That there's like 2 months of the year that are kind of average, and it's October, November. We get like strong howling northerly winds, so it's not the best time of year for surf. But I'm not complaining; it's still pretty good. And I mean, we haven't been going through the sort of severe lockdowns that you poor bastards are dealing with. So very thankful that I haven't had to do that. But we'll probably have to go through it sometime next year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you're looking nice and tan. I'm looking like Casper the Ghost down here with absolutely no sun. Have you got any plans post sort of border? I know the borders are obviously shut, but to get away and move back into what you do best?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm dying to surf some big waves, even just to get around Australia, to Western Australia, to Tasmania, back down to Vico, like just all the best big wave spots in the world. So I'm pumped just to do that, just to get around Australia, and then hopefully, sometime next year be able to get to Hawaii and over to Europe. And got a bucket list of waves that I still want to surf. So
that list probably
fingers crossed the world goes back to somewhat normal.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can start ticking those things off. Did you see? Obviously, you watched a bit of the surfing in the Olympics, which was a big moment for the sport, and being someone who's obviously grown the sport itself just through your career and in terms of exposure. How did you feel about seeing surfing in the Olympics in 2021?
I didn't know what to expect, honestly, because Japan is pretty fickle as far as waves go. And it's just like the format of the contest, they could have ended up in just ankle high waves, and it would have done surfing a real disservice. And I was kind of concerned about that, but then they ended up getting a typhoon and fun waves, and it was actually awesome to watch. Like, it was the most exciting surfing competition that I've watched all year. So
yeah, really
on it by the end. It is really good. You forget. I feel like I've had the last Olympics I wasn't as into, but now with surfing into it, I was pretty pumped on it again. And you kind of forget about that awesome like national spirit that you have when you watch the Olympic Games.
Yeah, it's funny. Rarely do you get like super glued to the tally watching the Olympics, but surfing in general, because it's just one of those things that could be on in the background and just sort of cruising and looking at who's doing what. But those last few heats were absolutely insane, and it was really good. It's a bit of a roll of the dice in terms of what might have happened, but Japan pulled through. So hopefully the next one there's some even bigger swell and some even crazier maneuvers. I think some of those Brazilian guys they're just phenomenal when it comes to the aerials. Like, they hit one of them and that's it. They're getting big numbers straight away. So they're hard to beat. Yeah.
So I actually think that the Olympics, is it France who got the Olympics for the next Olympics, I think, which means that the surfing could potentially actually be in Tahiti, like, because it's French Polynesia. So
Chopu.
The event will be at Chopu, which would be insane if they got some swell for that.
Absolutely. It's funny. I was having to think this morning because I'm a personal trainer. So, rolling around training clients and doing some strength work with a few athletes. And I was thinking about, obviously your career being a big wave surfer, and, you could be anything in the world. As a kid, you have the world at your feet. And I know where your passion lies is obviously sort of what you want to go towards if you want to enjoy your career. But I was just thinking, like, you could be anything in the world. You know, you could be a chippy, you could be a banker, you know, you could be a professional skateboarder. You could probably even get in the ring with you know, with your mate Richie Vass. And it's probably not, to me anyway, as gnarly and as stressful as some of those big waves. Like, why did you choose that? Like, what was the draw towards that that as a career? Because most people start surfing and then, you know, they might only get to doing 5-6 foot waves, and then you're taking on, you know, 20-30 footers.
I mean, I think you give me a little bit too much credit. I'm not sure that I had all these different opportunities at my feet that I could have become.
We'll call it a metaphor.
Not like the sharpest tool in the shed. Also, there were a bunch of other sports that I loved to do when I was super young that yeah, I wasn't good enough. But there was no other sport that I fell in love with more than surfing. There's just something about it that's just so unbelievably addictive. And even though I was terrified of the ocean when I was little, I slowly kind of built up the tolerance to that fear. And it was probably the first experience in the ocean that I had of actually overcoming a fear. So it was like I was terrified of this sport, like to the point where I didn't want to go in the ocean sometimes. But then that was my first exposure to actually overcoming a fear. And I think that kind of heightened my love for the sport. And from that point on, I had a couple of older surfers, Kobe Aberton, who were professional surfers. He's like 5-6 years older than me. And I kind of, when I was probably 13 years old, I was watching him from a distance and this amazing lifestyle that he had, getting paid to go surfing, travel the world. I mean, he was always driving around in the coolest car, had the hottest girlfriend, like all these different things that when you're a sort of 12, 13, 14-year-old, like that's what you want life to be like. And I guess that's what really drove me to figure out a way to be able to get a career out of the sport of surfing.
And was that just sheer hard work? I mean, obviously hard work goes into it to get to where you want to be in anything, but because in a lot of your, you know, recent sort of docos, and obviously going back and watching some of the Fighting Fear, and then the other side of fear, one of your more recent ones, you sort of talk about how, you know, you didn't think you're the most talented, but you just were progressing or just pushing yourself. So do you think it came down to just sheer hard work and determination at times, just to get yourself to the level where you're performing professionally?
Yeah, I always found, for me, the big part of being successful in surfing was, one, the ability to deal with fear and stress, because the only way I was ever going to have a career in the sport of surfing was to surf big waves. It was basically about surfing waves that other people didn't want to surf. And I could get exposure and attract sponsorships by doing that, because I wasn't talented enough to be a competition surfer. I just wasn't good enough. Like, I was good, but I never even made it to the national titles when I was a kid, you know, like I never even qualified for that. So I was never going to be that sort of world tour level surfer. So I came to terms with that earlier on, probably when I was in my early 20s, and then made a decision after actually like being on the verge of giving up on the dream of surfing as a career. I think I was about 19, and I was working in a bar down in Circular Quay. I kind of didn't have the sponsorships to that would stop me from having to work. So I was working sort of making coffees in the morning, cocktails at night, and then just traveling to surf when I had the chance. And I remember I was like pretty much starting to decide, like, I'm going to give away the dream of surfing and go off and try and study something or take up a trade or just do something else. And then out of the blue, I got invited on a trip down to Tasmania to surf Shipstone's Bluff. So Shipstone's Bluff at that time, like, there was just rumors about this monster wave going around the surf industry. And I dead set did not want to go and surf it. I'd heard about this wave and seen a couple of photos, and it looked terrifying. But I figured that if I didn't go on that trip, there was no way I was getting an invitation like that ever again. And that was probably like the one shot I had at possibly kickstarting a surf career. So I ended up going down there and ended up just so having to surf some of the biggest barreling waves in the history of the sport. And after that, I got so many photos and footage and stuff all throughout the media in Australia and around the world. And that got me my first ever big surfing sponsorship. And it kind of made the surfing industry and the rest of the world just consider me as a big wave surfer. and I kind of just, those sponsorships were predicated on me being a big wave surfer. So I was like, well, here's the career that I've got. I got to figure out a way to like deal with all this fear and stress of surfing these big waves so that I can do it over and over again and just keep this this dream alive. And that's what I did for kind of the next 10, 15 years. But it was more to do with, for me, dealing with the fear and the stress and managing that than it was to do with like exceptional like athletic ability or anything like that. It was more to do with drive, motivation, dealing with fear, and kind of some of the smarts around the business aspect of surfing and learning like the marketing side of surfing and why you're valuable as a surfer to a company. And I just tried to always figure all the different ways that I could be valuable to my sponsors, aside from being the most talented surfer, which I wasn't. So I was always constantly trying to make up for that fact. And like I said, just keep the dream alive for as long as I could.
Are you, were you charging these waves with your, like obviously your mates with Kobe Abbott, and he's quite known for doing the same stuff. And then obviously Richie and that sort of crew. So were they the guys that were inviting you to, like, were they part of the first experience for you? And what's the kind of advice that is getting, pushed down the line for you when it's your first day on the job?
Yeah, it's funny. Kobe was kind of the best person to travel and surf big waves with, because he was an amazingly talented surfer, like good enough to be high level world tour surfer. But then at the same time, he was just phenomenal in big waves. And he was just really good at pushing, us to surf big waves as well when we were out in the water, even to the point where it was like, if you pulled back on, one of the biggest waves of the day, the set wave, and you let it go, then you'd be walking home. Like you didn't get a ride back in the car, like, so there were just dynamics like that, and then being exposed to like that sort of, that level of being pushed, it just helped me so much when I started to travel and surf big waves with other surfers. I'd kind of been conditioned to do that,
You're pushing them into it.
Yeah, I've never been able to push other surfers like that though. It's like I can never push. I'm too scared that if I were to push a young surfer like that they would get injured or hurt. So I've never been able to do it in the same way.
Sometimes you need that. You need the people that you trust around you to give you a little bit of a push and light a bit of a fire up your on your ass. So you're I don't know. Sometimes it's a leap you have to take to get to where you want to be. And I'm sure 1,000 times over you'd talk yourself out of it if they weren't there. And then you never know what might have came after that. So, it's good to have those people around you. I think, everyone has, you got a friendship group, especially when you're younger. I know us boys are pretty similar in the sense of like, you get pushed to do things that might be a little bit semi-risky, but in the end you kind of thank yourself that you did do it, because it was actually a really good experience. And I was thinking about a time when I might have faced some sort of fear that I didn't really want to do, and I laugh about this now because I still have the same thoughts in my head. I was actually doing a talk I was asked to come back to a university and do a talk on strength and conditioning and training for a marathon to all these staff members. And I hadn't really done anything similar. I was always pretty good at public speaking. I didn't have an issue with that in the classroom or anything of that sort, but, getting up with a microphone and in some sort of, I guess, like I wouldn't say arena, but, theater type operation. And then having all these staff looking at you going, they're meant to be smarter than you. So I'm thinking anything I say here, they're going to know I'm lying. But I kind of got up and, I sat in the car, and when I was sitting in the car, I was thinking, there's no way I'm going in. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to enter this building. Like I can't do it. And obviously, got in there and just bit the bullet and went hard and did a really good job. It got recorded, which I didn't realize it was going to get filmed, and ended up going to my now boss who saw it, and he was like, I didn't realize that you knew this. We were friends, but he's like, I'm starting a gym and I didn't realize that you knew so much about sports science and, wanted a career in this. And he just happened to see it on Facebook. So looking back at those moments that you take a bit of a leap and you take the risk, even though I was very close to driving home and running away, I'm glad I did, because I might not be in the same position I am now.
Yeah, that's so true. And I see that often this commonality where I think that the fear centers of your brain, like that all those deeply ingrained fears that you have that are trying to keep you alive, right? I think they keep the majority of us across the board at about 30% of our capacity for different things. You know, like it seems like your fear kicks in at the 30% mark. And I notice this across the board in different activities. So for big wave surfing, you do breath hold training, right? And when you're learning to hold your breath, your panic response kicks in really early, like at about a third of the way in of your capacity to hold your breath. And it's like when you feel that fear and you're underwater, the response is that you're trying to, your brain wants you to panic and freak out and try and get to the top and get out of the situation. But if you're actually able to stay calm in that first period when the pain arises in your lungs, you've got another 2/3 capacity or potential for your breath hold. And then I often see that, like, it's pretty similar. You would notice this probably in the gym. It's like your fatigue threshold seems to kick in like at certain points. But I always find that for me, it's like pretty much around the 30 to 50% mark, the fatigue threshold will kick in. But then I've probably got that much more if I really wanted to dive deep to the well, or whether it's to do with strength. And I think that usually is like a thing to think about, because possibly in your life, you're leaving anywhere from 50 to 70% of potential across different aspects of your life on the table, just because your brain's constantly trying to keep you comfortable and safe all the time. So you kind of don't know what where you could possibly take any sort of activity you're doing.
Yeah, it's funny because funny you say the gym thing, like, if we were to say, oh, we're going to run 10Ks, that's it. Your brain's switching off for 10Ks and that's it, you're done. But I'm sure if you say, look, we're going to go out and run 15Ks, you're going to run the 15Ks. But when you did the 10Ks, you thought you couldn't run anymore. So, there's those mind games that you can play on yourself and constant reminders to make sure that you are pushing yourself in the right direction. And it's scary to think.
And if you put something on the line, so it's like I could run. At the moment, I'd struggle to run 10Ks. I'd be collapsing. But if you said to me that your young daughter's life depends on you running this 10Ks, like I'd set a PB by miles, and I wouldn't even feel the fatigue, so it's that's that combination between fear and motivation.
It's scary to think what we are holding back, and you got to, whether that's tell yourself every day, push yourself to do something uncomfortable, then so be it, because I'm sure everyone can get a little bit more out of themselves. I spoke to Richie Vass about a few episodes ago. We had a good conversation, and it was perfect that you come on now, because I wanted to ask you this question. I asked him about sort of what he feels when he's in the wave, and he's in that big wave, or probably from the moment that you're getting towed in to actually being in the wave. And he sort of said, look, you have to ask my friend Mark Mathews about that, because he's far more calculated in his approach, whereas I was a lot more just do and just kind of see what happens. I'd be living more in the moment of just doing, whereas you're probably taking more a calculated approach. Could you sort of walk us through, if you could take yourself back, walk us through, like, all right, you're getting towed in, you're holding the rope, and knowing that there's a 30-foot wave behind you ready to, basically eat you if you come off. Talk us through those moments up until sort of getting spat out.
Yeah, in that moment, like when you're out the back waiting for a wave, and then it comes, right? Like, so you see the horizon kind of goes black and these huge mountains of water approaching the reef. And then from that moment on, you're studying every wave and you're trying to pick which one is going to be the one to ride. And then when you do choose that wave, then you make a motion to move, and you're starting to move to catch that wave, like the jet ski's towing you in. Through all that process is like, from the moment you see the waves, you're terrified. Like your brain is freaking out, and it's kind of telling you all these different things, like to not do it, that wave's not right, or this wave's not right, or you should position here and here and here. And for me, it's like having to let go of all that fear, because initially I've made the decision that I want to ride the biggest wave of the day. I understand the consequences is if I fall. I've prepared for that. I've done all the training, to deal with wipeouts. I've got the safety team in place. If something serious goes wrong, we know exactly what we're going to do if I do fall. So I've made the decision. I want the biggest wave of the day. Now it's about managing all that fear so that I can make a calculated effort of how I'm going to ride this wave to the best of my ability. Because if you step over the line into a panic state, then you don't clearly ride the wave to the best of your potential. And then I also think like there's the flip side of that, where that fear or that panic state can push you to a place where you're just like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to ride it. I'm not going to think about it, because you actually don't want to think about it because it's so scary. So you just go, fuck it, just do it and whatever, like I find like if you extend that to other things, that notion is like, so in public speaking, and you'll know this from doing the talks that you're doing, when you have a big talk coming up and something that makes you nervous about doing it, often your brain is like, it'll try and tell you to like, oh, fuck it, don't worry, we'll just do it, we'll wing it on the day, we'll be right, and that notion is not coming from confidence. Like the notion to do that is coming from the fear of doing the preparation. Like you don't actually want to think about it in the moment and prepare for it because it's uncomfortable. It's kind of scary to think about what people are how they're gonna judge what you're gonna say. So it's like you, in a way, to take that approach where you're just like, I don't care, I'll be fine, I'll wing it. In a way, you're giving into your fear there, like rather than being like, okay, I'm terrified, this is scary to think about, but I'm going to sit in this fear and I'm going to use it to give myself the best chance to do whatever I'm going to do right, and I think like that's that same moment of going into the wave, like terrified, but I want to stay calculated so that I can position myself and get as deep as I can in the barreling part of the wave and still make it, I think that's that kind of that thing. Sometimes you don't want to face the fear, so you want to just wing it, like I've done plenty of that in my life. I've done plenty of that in my life too, but the outcome's never as good.
And that fail to prepare or prepare to fail notion, that little quote is always good to remind yourself of, and that kind of draws into reducing that anxiety you have about certain situations. I know if you're prepared, you're sort of ready to rock and roll, and you definitely don't have that burning anxiety down in your guts. But when you're not prepared, you got the anxiety of like, what's going to go wrong? What could happen here? You've almost played out every situation in your brain of what might go wrong, what might go right. In terms of anxiety and preparation, and this was a video, this is how I added you on LinkedIn, and because I saw one of these videos that you'd posted around anxiety, and you're talking about the TV being played, like the TV in your head, and how you treat that. Do you think that it's better to think about every situation that could arise, or do you think that visualizing the only good situation that could happen? Does that make sense?
Yeah. For me, when I want to prepare to surf big waves, I want to think about all the things that could go wrong so that I could do enough preparation for each of those things so that they don't go wrong, So, but then I have to imagine all the things that can go wrong. And my brain naturally does that anyway, like that's that notion that I'm talking about is like when I see a swell forecast and I know in 7 days time, I'm going to be surfing huge waves, then it's like a TV switches on in my head, and the TV just constantly plays like a stream of thoughts of all the different things that might go wrong, whether it's I'm going to get eaten by a shark, I'm going to smash my head on my board and get knocked out underwater, or I'm going to injure myself in this way. It just plays all the negatives out, right? And I've just always found if I dwell on that, if I watch that TV, like if I focus on it too much, get caught up in that stream of thoughts, then by the time I get to the day of surfing a week down the track, if my body feels like I've been through 1,000 wipeouts just because I've been thinking about them over and over again and just letting them play in my head and get caught up in that sort of emotional state of being anxious, like trying to play them out in my head. So to me, I was like, well, how can I what can I do that will turn the volume down on that TV or to stop me from having to dwell on those thoughts? And I tried often like lots of little cognitive hacks that a lot of sports psychs and stuff will tell you. like whether it's meditation type things or like just things that just completely take you out of your mind and then get you centered in the present moment. And those things are beneficial, don't get me wrong, but they never work unless you've done the preparation. So I just always found it the best way to be able to turn the volume down on that TV in my head was to actually like make a concerted effort to think about things that can go wrong, right? But then prepare for exactly what we're going to do when they do go wrong, or go through the training that I need to go through to get myself ready for it. And then the more preparation I've done, then that the volume on the TV turns down, and those thoughts aren't as powerful. Like they don't elicit that emotional response that's making me tired. And then I can use some of those cognitive hacks, like the meditative hacks, the breathing techniques and stuff like that. Then they actually work. But if I don't do the preparation and I just focus on trying to do the hacks, it's never powerful enough. Like the anxiety's still there. The only thing that alleviates the anxiety is the hard work and the preparation. Not saying that it totally alleviates it, because that would be ridiculous. Like I'm always still nervous to a degree, but it's nerves that I can manage, that nerves that are not exhausting me. And then I'm always nervous on the day, but it once I'm out in the water, that the nerve switches to excitement, like when I'm prepared, because I don't know, physiologically it's very similar. Like what your body does when it's nervous compared to what it does when it's excited is super similar. Like it's almost just a perspective that you have.
Like how you're actually processing the emotion is almost the exact same thing. It just depends on how you're thinking about that emotion. Because there's a good a lot of boxers and fighters and stuff will always say, the day that you're not nervous when you get in the ring is the day you lose. The day you think you're going to win and you're not nervous, you're not feeling those nerves, is the day you lose. And do you think the same thing? Like if you were to go out there and think, you know what, this is easy, been here before, piece of piss, laughing, and then that's where it all goes wrong. Would that be like? Do you think that's kind of how this situation works? You need to have that nervous energy to get the job done.
Yeah, you need to be in that perfect zone, like where there's enough nerves that you'll focus, but not too much nerves that it's debilitating. It's like in that perfect zone. And I've found both ways. Like when I've been overly confident, I get injured. And when I've been hyper nervous and concerned, I get injured. Like, so there's a sweet spot definitely in there. And it's that spot that you focus and manage to access your talent to the best of your ability. That's kind of, and then that's that thing with the anxiety versus the excitement. It's like, and the expression of the emotion. It's kind of like what it feels like to me when I'm in those moments. It's like how I use that energy. It's like, so energy is being created in your body based on whether you're nervous in a situation or based on whether you're excited about a situation, right? It's just energy being created. And it's like energy either trying to get you to cower away and avoid whatever you're going to do, or if you feel that energy and embrace it, then it's like you can use it to manage the situation better. And I often see it, like, because I'm fascinated by like fighters, like whether it's mixed martial arts or boxing or anything, because I see that element of competition, like it has the physical component, physical danger that they have to deal with. So it's that level of fear, but then it's also like the performance aspect of fear. It's like they're going in to compete on their own in front of this huge audience. They've put, like all this time and preparation on the line, and it's like win or lose in that moment. Like, so I just see those sports as the most heightened aspect of dealing with different versions of fear and anxiety. And I can notice, like, when I watch certain fighters, like the way they're embracing the fear, or you can see them like shell, or like the nerves like takes all the energy out of them versus
they can't get out their talents. Actually like
it's like that energy.
Yeah,
it's like they're trying to like stop the nerves, but then doing that, it's like you're using more energy to try and suppress the nervous energy rather than embracing it, like. And then you see some fighters that it's like that they like stand at the weigh-ins and like all the energy of the crowds there and that, and rather than like being tense and nervous, they're just like, they love it, you know, like they're embracing that feeling, and then
Not
they're
running away.
embracing the nerves within the fight, you know, like I find it fascinating to watch. Like it's insane.
Same thing. I absolutely love it because it's just the peak of human performance, brain and body working together. But I mean, you'd smell my pants from the car park, I reckon, if it was me. So it would be, it's credit to them all. They're insane athletes.
But in saying that, it's like that they have the skills and knowledge. Whenever I talk to people about dealing with fear, it's like I don't see dealing with fear as like, okay, I need to build more courage so that I can go and take more risk. Like that's not necessarily the best way to deal with fear. The best way to deal with fear is I need to build more skills, more knowledge to take risk out of what I'm going to do. And I mean, that's what they do with their training, you know, like, and you often don't see many people necessarily where they're confident in that domain that they train at all day, every day. And then you can just take them totally into a different domain where they don't have the skills and the knowledge. Like they'll be scared there, you know, like it's just, that's natural. It's because you don't have the skill set. They might have the confidence to take on the feelings of fear to be able to build a new skill set, more so because they've overcome a fear in one aspect of their life. So they've learned that that's possible to do. And then you can carry that notion over into something else. But it's rare that you would ever find someone who's like I could take, like fighters could take me into the cage. I'd be terrified and nervous, right? But I could take all those fighters out into the ocean, 30-foot waves, and they'll be terrified and nervous.
Absolutely.
You know?
It's the domain that you're in.
But you do have in your brain that you have lived through something scary and you can conquer it. So then you can take that notion and put it into practice to do the experience, get the experience, you know?
And just, exposure to the situation is always going to build that confidence in yourself. And, you know, moving on to your injury that, you know, obviously this is like the biggest, we're looking at the pictures of it. And I went back and watched this last night on the Red Bull doco. And, you know, like, I mean, explain for the audience kind of what the injuries were and how it happened, because the pictures are pretty horrific. Like it's insanity. The big gash on your leg, and then the sort of headspace that it took you to after that.
Yeah, I was surfing what we call a slab wave. So a wave that comes out of really deep water and breaks onto a shallow reef, like a rock bed. And we surf these waves because when a wave does that, it maximizes the barreling part of the wave, which if you successfully ride a wave like that, it's the best feeling in the sport of surfing. But it also makes for like really good photos and footage, which is good for your career, right? And I was surfing a wave down the south coast of New South Wales. It's nicknamed Killers. So it's got a pretty appropriate name because it's such a powerful wave that breaks on a really shallow reef. And I was just unfortunate where I picked the wrong wave. And there's a moment when I'm standing on my board where it becomes apparent to me, you know, in the blink of an eye that this wave's too big for how shallow the reef is and it's going to close out. So I've got no other choice but to try and get off the wave at that moment to avoid a wipeout. And so I dove forward off my board to try and get down underwater and let the wave pass over the top of me so that I could swim away to safety. And I've done that 1,000 times before, like successfully. But this time there was too much power in the wave. And just as I was swimming away to safety, the wave kind of grabbed me and it pulled me back, lifted me up, and then smashed me into the reef. And I landed with all my weight on one leg. And it was like my leg got stuck in a groove in the reef. And then all the power of the wave broke on my back and it just compressed me into the reef. And I just straight away felt my knee pop.
Is that shock or fear? Are you feeling, because what's going on? Like, are you actually feeling this?
You feel this like really, really sharp, like explosion of pain. And I know, like from other injuries, it's like if you feel a certain amount of pain when you're underwater getting rolled around, you know that it's bad, because often with the adrenaline of a wipeout and getting rolled around underwater, you might have done an injury, but you'll barely feel it. You know, like I've had moments where I've hit my head on the reef, didn't feel like all that much, but then I've got like 15 stitches in the back of my head, like because the adrenaline masks it. But this time, I felt severe pain straight away. So I knew straight away it was something like really bad. And then the boys ended up rescuing me when I got back to the surface, and then took me into the beach and called for medical help. And helicopter came and got me and took me to the nearest hospital. And I was kind of like, man, in a daze that whole process, because the pain was so bad. I was like in and out of consciousness. And then the ambulance officers, they could see how bad it was, so they
give me the green stick. Give me the green stick.
Ketamine.
Are you kidding?
Yeah,
Saturday
intravenous ketamine.
Yeah, right.
And so I was like on another planet from that point. But I didn't feel any of the pain from that moment on. But all I kind of remember next was I had this one flash moment of, I woke up in the helicopter. And I couldn't remember anything about what had happened. All I did was, it's like I woke up from a dream, like from the ketamine, and I was in a neck brace for whatever reason. And I was in the helicopter. I couldn't move at all. And I started freaking out because I thought I'd broken my neck. Like I didn't know what was happening. And the ambulance officer says, no, just don't worry. He's like, it's just your leg. It's just your leg. You're fine. We're taking you to hospital. So that was kind of a relief. But
yeah, coming off the
like
ketamine, legs busted,
Yeah.
you got the neck brace on, and you're in a helicopter. It's
I
all
thought this
happening.
is not good.
Yeah, it can't be good.
But then I got to hospital. They did emergency surgery on my leg. They managed to repair a torn artery that was in my leg, because I totally dislocated my knee. I tore every ligament and tendon that holds the knee joint together. And then when my knee was separated and I was getting rolled around underwater, because my knee was apart, that tore through the major arteries in my leg. And the surgeons, they managed to fix that. They took another piece of vein from my other leg and put it into that leg and fixed the artery. And so that was all good. And the surgeon actually said if it took an extra hour for me to get to hospital, he would have had to amputate my leg because of the internal bleeding. So I was so lucky that the ambulance officer called for the helicopter instead of driving me to the hospital, because they were considering both options, because there was no external blood coming from my leg. So it kind of didn't look that bad.
Yeah, it's just so deep. It's not bleeding. One of those ones. It's that actually gives me goosebumps even listening to it, because you just think, being in that situation is just so like there's seconds and minutes involved of you having, the life you got now, and then a totally different, a life having no leg, but then the comeback, like you obviously.
Well, I woke up like that. The surgeons, like, they told me that I fixed the arteries, but the major nerve that runs through the knee joint and controls your foot, that had been destroyed. And the surgeons were like, there's nothing we're going to be able to do to fix that. And like he said, you're never going to be able to use your foot, again. And he's pretty much telling me that I'm not surfing ever again, that my career and my career back then in 2016 was pretty much that was the pinnacle of my career, as far as I'd invested, like, I don't know, like 15 years plus into this career, and finally gotten to the point where I was like getting paid all this money off sponsors, that like it was enough money that I was actually able to save money, set myself up for my future. And then blink of an eye, it was gone. All of it. Everything was finished. And I kind of just spiraled down in this dark hole, man, after getting that news. And it was funny, like over the next month when I was stuck in hospital, all the wounds started to get infected in my leg, and they started to get concerned again. If the infections were going to spread and get worse, they'd have to amputate my leg. And I was at that point, I was like, I didn't really care, because I figured I wasn't going to surf again anyway because of the nerve damage. So I didn't really care that they were going to cut my leg off. And I was just at rock bottom by that point. And then it was crazy. Out of the blue, I got this a text message, like a direct message on Instagram from this young guy. His name's Jason. And Jason, he wrote to me, he's like, "Oh, Mark, big fan of yours. Been following your career ever since I was little. I read about what had happened to you on this surf media website. And I read that you're in Canberra Hospital." And he's like, "I'm in Canberra Hospital too. do you reckon I could come up and get a photo with you? And I was like, I didn't want to see anyone at that point. I didn't even reply to the kid. I just had my phone aside. It was my now wife. She had seen the message, and she wrote back to Jason as though it was from me, and it's like, yeah, no worries, Jace. Love to meet you. Why don't you come up this afternoon? Anyway, Jace, that afternoon, he gets wheeled into my hospital bedroom by his brother, Will. See, Jason and Will had been on the first trip of an around the world holiday. And Jace, they decided to go snowboarding, and he, last run of the day, slipped on the ice doing this small jump, broke his neck, complete quadriplegic. And he came up and gets pushed up to my hospital bedside, his big grin on his face. And I swear, in the moment that I shook his hand, it was like everything changed in my head. My whole perspective of what I was dealing with just completely changed. Like, I went from being real angry, frustrated, just full of self-pity for what I had to deal with, feeling like the world's against me. And then in that moment, just in the blink of an eye, I was like, I felt like the luckiest person alive. I mean, it's a selfish response, but it was the response that I had. And like, because if I had to hit the reef any other way, I could be dealing with what this poor kid was dealing with, a situation that was a million times worse than what I was dealing with.
It's so out of your control as well.
Yeah.
What happened to you, you don't even know. And that's, we all skate through life, we don't think it's ever going to happen to us. So, and everyone has that thought. Everyone, like, I'm sure we all think it's just not going to be me until it does. So, it's incredible that, he's sort of placed in your life at that time. And, where you were saying that you're at rock bottom and just automatically sort of changed your headspace. And, we're all so tunnel visioned now. You always think about day to day, you're working, you think about yourself. You're not really thinking about others. You're not really thinking about the things that you do appreciate. And that's where those situations do bring you back down to earth a little bit and give you that perspective of how lucky that you are. And then obviously that someone who's going through that is, going through things far worse, but obviously, their perspective on things is they've got a great perspective on it. And you just really sort of try and take that strength and that courage for yourself and realize that things aren't so bad.
Yeah. It's just something that I don't think someone could have just told me. Like, you can't, it's very hard to just tell someone, it's like, your problems aren't that bad. They could be way worse. So you should be happier to deal with them. Like, that never seems to work. If anything, it makes people kind of like want to prove you wrong and show you how bad their problems are. But for me, it was just such a real interaction that it just changed my perspective of what I was dealing with. And then, like, I was just over the next like 5-6 days that much happier about what I was dealing with, that all the infections in my leg that I had completely healed. Like, and all of it got better. And I was just like, whoa, like, I couldn't believe it. Even the doctors were surprised. And they were like, I remember this one doctor coming up being like, mate, are you rubbing some kind of weird herbal shit into your leg that's healing the wounds? Yeah, like, what are you doing differently? And there was nothing that I was doing differently other than I was now like lying in that hospital bed, just that little bit happier to be there versus just hating every moment of the day, like, and that I just noticed a change in the way my body healed. Whether it was that, I don't know, but that's all I could put it down to. And I just figured that was it was worth looking into, and then from that point I went online and if you Google the science of gratitude, you can find all these different studies, like hundreds of them, that show a correlation between when you can cultivate or feel that emotional state of gratitude. So if you can just feel lucky about something in that moment, you can see physiological changes in your nervous system and the optimization of the way your nervous system runs, especially like different functions within the immune system, which was super interesting when I was looking at that. So I just figured that through all the rehab that I knew that I had ahead of me, even though I wasn't really focused on surfing, I just wanted to be able to at least get back in the ocean and swim and be able to, try and walk somewhat normally and stuff. I kind of tried to make that the main focus of what I was doing, like just to feel the gratitude as much as I could in the day.
And but what were those techniques? Because gratitude, if you asked me, if you said, Taylor, I want you to, I don't know, show some gratitude. Sometimes it's hard to, I know what gratitude is, but it's hard to put it into practice. So what was some of the things that you did to put into practice so you could be like, okay, this is the things that I'm really appreciative about, or I really, I really appreciate this person for being in my life. Like, how do you put that into practice? What were some of the things that you did?
I found this one technique. It's called habit stacking. It's a really good technique. It's like where you take the positive lifestyle habit that you want to implement in your life, whatever that is. Like, so for me, it was practicing gratitude. And then you stack it on top of your primary habits. So your primary habits are just all the things that you do every day over and over again without fail. So you might have a shower every morning, brush your teeth. You might sit down for a coffee at some stage. You might, I don't know, commute to work, or you might sit down for lunch or watch your favorite TV series at night. Like all the things that you do pretty much every day without fail, they're your primary habits. So the technique is taking the new positive lifestyle habit and piggybacking it off the primary habit. So what that looked like for me when I wanted to practice gratitude consistently was I'd take all different techniques. So if you Google gratitude, cultivating gratitude techniques, there's just hundreds that come up. And what the ones that I was using was, so in the morning when I wanted to have a coffee, I wasn't allowed to have the coffee until I'd just taken a piece of paper out and written down 3 things that I was grateful for. And it's just the process of writing it out forces you to think about it. And then as soon as you start thinking about it for long enough, you have the emotional reaction. So I'd do that and I'd just get my wife or someone to police it. So it was like, they wouldn't let me have the coffee until I gave them the piece of paper with it written down,
Are you still doing it now? Is it something that you still, obviously you're probably better at it now, just in terms of your own ability to, without even writing it down, I'm sure that you're implementing those techniques, but it's still something that, day to day, you like to implement for yourself, just as something to I don't know, give you a little bit more oomph during the day and throughout life.
Yeah, always if I'm going through a particularly like rough patch, I try and bring it back in. But I found when I did it for so long through the rehab, it started to become habitual itself. So every time I'd like smell the coffee being made in the morning, I'd have the emotional reaction without even doing anything, because you just formed a different like sort of pattern or habit. The other one that was like I did one, there were 2 other ones that were good. Was one I built on my phone like a slideshow. So just using your phone with all the photos you have in your phone, you just make a slideshow with all photos that represent things that you're grateful for, like maybe loved ones, family members, friends, or just like anything. Like you could have a photo of something that represents Australia because you feel lucky to live in Australia, or like just anything that makes you, feel lucky about your life. And you create the slideshow, put your favorite song. And I would like, before I went to physio, like, so to do all the training that I had to do on my leg, which I fucking hated going to do. Like it sucked. It was that painful and just monotonous work. But I'd watch that slideshow with my headphones on for at least a minute before I started the exercises. And it's like I'd have the emotional reaction and then I'd start doing the exercises straight away. And I just noticed that in that state, I could always deal with the pain of the exercises a little bit better. And it just seemed that like my body would adapt to the exercises that much better, rather than being in that head state the whole time I was exercising or training of just like, fuck, I hate this sucks, blah, blah, like I just think in that state, you're like, you're just setting yourself up to not adapt to the exercises you're doing,
Yeah.
And that made a big difference.
Yeah.
And then the third one, like I can get you to do this right now and I'll show you that this makes you feel an emotional state of gratitude. It's pretty simple. Like you just grab your phone. So grab your phone.
Yeah, we got it out.
Write a text message out to someone. Think about someone in your life that has helped you out in some way in the last week, in the last month, in the last year. and just write a real basic text message just saying, hey, I was just thinking that I want to say thanks for everything you've been doing for me. Like just a real simple text message.
I'm going to write it right now, Stan. Keep going. I'm going to write it as we speak.
Yeah, so you could, and for people that like find this awkward, because I found it awkward to do because I never sent messages like this to people. Like, when do you ever really do it that often? So it is kind of awkward, and you get funny responses sometimes. But the more awkward it is, the more powerful it is when you do it. The better it is for you, the more awkward it is. So I don't know if people listening want to message, just right. I was just listening to this podcast, and this guy was talking about gratitude, and it just made me think how lucky I am to have you in my life. And I just want to say thanks. Like just a message like that, right? And then just see that as you send that message, you'll feel it. You'll feel the emotional response of gratitude. And the bonus is that the person you send it to feels fucking awesome too.
Yeah, they're going about their day going, fuck, how good's this? Ty's been pumped up. He loves having me around. In a time where, and I have felt, I think we all feel like this, and this is a weird time because we've got COVID and lockdowns and all sorts of stuff going on. But in a time now where like there's so many, suicides and depression, and there's just so much anxiety and fear of the unknown and things happening, and people losing jobs and stuff like that. It wasn't that long ago that, or even some days anyway during the week, you feel like, I know I do, like, I can't work. And, a lot of people going through the same thing, but, can't work, can't do this. And, all it takes sometimes is a walk outside. And for me anyway, to walk outside and just walk through the park I love to walk through, and just think about all the good things and how good it is the place that I do work. And when I get back to it and the fun I get to have with my friends and the trips we've been on and things like that. So, in a time where there's so much depression and suicide, I think it's super needed. And these are definitely techniques that you could use and put into action right now, just to, make you feel a little bit better and hopefully put you on the right path if that's where you're heading.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, and I'm not going through it to the extent of what people in Melbourne, like you guys, are dealing with, or in Sydney. That's a whole nother ballgame, and it's not like that. You should diminish how difficult it is, because it's ridiculously difficult. It's to the point that it's human torture what they're doing to people. So it's not like you should have other people, like someone like me, saying to you, your problems aren't that bad. Like you should just be grateful. Like, that's bullshit. Your problems are really bad. But if you want to make them a little easier for yourself, then trying to shift your perspective, it's easier said than done often, but if you can, then that's just going to give you the best chance of dealing with that problem. There's just one aspect, one little factor that might help. There are so many other factors that go into people suffering and actual, like, suicidal level depression, and some little technique like that might be beneficial. Probably won't be enough. There's probably a whole lot of other things that are valuable that you could focus on, but it's just worth giving it a shot, I think. Like, but it's up to you to do it. It's like no one can tell you that your problem's not bad, because that's rubbish. Yeah. It's
look, it's great advice. It's great advice, and these I'll take this away and give these things a crack as well. And I know just from speaking to you how good you are at speaking and conveying your message, and just from seeing your videos, very captivating when you're talking to people on stage. So you moved into keynote speaking now, and I love it. I personally love watching things like that. What's inspired you to do that? And then I guess, where do you want to take it? What's the impact you want to make with your keynotes now that you're doing them, quite often, like we discussed off air?
So I've been doing it for quite a long time, just along the side of surfing. I just had a friend of a friend who was into it and had a business in America, and he taught me all about it. So I don't like, to be honest, I don't actually like the process of doing. Like, I don't actually like doing, like, I'm hyper introverted. And it's fucking exhausting for me to do it, and I get so anxious speaking in front of people. Like, less now, because I've kind of built the skill set that I need to manage.
You'd never know. But, you would absolutely never know. You're hiding it well.
People don't realize, but it's like, I won't speak now for the next 3 days, pretty much, which my wife hates. But, she reckons I've got like a word count, and when I hit the word count, I'm just done for the rest of the week. So that's kind of what happens. But I don't know. I got a lot more into it when I had the injury with my leg, because I figured I need a new career, and this is one way to do it. It was also really beneficial for me, like in that period where I was trapped, like pretty much in a hospital bed for a year, just not being able to do anything. And to be able to focus on a different skill, like some element of a skill that I could progress in, that kept me sane. Like, and it's interesting because it was, I came across this Russian neuroscientist work on why it's so valuable to have progression in your life, which also like relates exactly to what we're talking about when how difficult lockdowns and stuff are, right? Like, so it's like all these restrictions that are imposed on you are stopping all these elements of progression in your life, whether it's to do with your business, your career, your health, like, or like your relationships, like all these different things are just getting forcefully paused, like, and one of the reasons why that is so unbelievably difficult for people is because the progression in life is what keeps you sane. Like learning things, doing things, moving towards things that are valuable is what keeps you sane. And this one Russian neuroscientist, he was explaining, like he studied this mechanism in the brain that he coined the orienting reflex, right? And he believed that it was responsible, this one reflex, in a roundabout way. It was kind of this start point and it was responsible for your brain's ability to produce positive emotion, and up to 80% of your brain's ability to produce positive emotion came from this mechanism. And what the mechanism does, the orienting reflex, like constantly scans your environment, and it looks for evidence of progression towards anything meaningful, like, so any sort of goal, and it's constantly scanning. And then when it notices that you've made a little bit of progression, it creates positive emotion, like the dopamine in your brain. And so why that helped me so much is like when I was laying in bed and just going crazy, as soon as I shifted and started to learn a new skill, and I'd noticed that I was getting, like, putting in the hard work that I hated doing, but I'd noticed those little moments that I was getting better at it, that just kept me sane, like progressing towards. So it's like people have these forced restrictions, but within the restrictions, if you can find like something that you enjoy doing and just focus on this new skill within the restriction that you can still find progress in, like upskilling yourself in some sort of way or just doing something, then that will keep you sane within the confines of the restrictions that are imposed. Like I found that so fascinating, that's the majority of your brain's ability to create positive emotion comes from that. And then
but you can pin that back to stuff. You can look back and think, hang on, I remember when this happened, and I know the feeling I got when I started to make that shift. And straight away, like that feels good for a reason, and that keeps you at the table with anything you do.
The problem is that's like when that's stripped, so that mechanism in your brain isn't functioning well. So it doesn't function well if you're not clear on what you want to do, right? So if you haven't sat down and gone, fuck, I've got one life to live, like this limited amount of time on the planet, this is what I want to get from it, this is what's important for me, right? So if you haven't done that and figured out what's important, and then figured out how your day-to-day actions adhere to that picture of success or importance in your life, if you don't do that often enough and make it clear, then that part of your brain can't perceive the progress, like, and it becomes uncertain, and it's that uncertainty that creates the stress and the anxiety and doesn't allow it to produce the positive emotion. So creating like the clarity on what's important to you is like fundamental. But then the problem is when your brain doesn't get it from the progression, right, or from something meaningful, it looks for it in the easiest possible solution to get positive emotion, like the quick short-term fix. And that's always all the different vices that we have, whether it's junk food, eating in excess, alcohol, gambling, like all these different things that we do that are just real easy, like
you straight away get that
social
kick.
media, like all these different things. It's like your brain can't get it from here, so it's just going to go there. And then I'm not trying to say like you need to be a saint and not do all those things, but the ability to like
I'm
keep
definitely
them
not a
in
saint.
check. Yeah. The ability to keep all those things in check is predicated on the fact that you're progressing towards something meaningful. That's the only way you can keep them in check. Otherwise, your brain has to get it, and that's where it'll get it from.
I
So
think
it's
the
like,
listeners will get a lot out of that. I'm getting a lot out of that because, yeah, it's good to. I think it's so easy to get muddled up and think, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I moving towards the goal I want to? And then it's like your attention shifts and you're like, these are all. It's like the man who chases all the rabbits catches none. You know, so you really need to focus on what it is that you actually want, and then how you're going to, or reverse engineer how you're going to get there, and take those steps to get there, and start feeling those feelings of progression, and you get those happy emotions, and that's when things start to align. I think there was the
and you don't even, and the other add-on, sorry to interrupt,
no, you're
the
right.
other add-on is like, don't worry that you might pick the wrong thing to focus on, right? Like, because if you get too worried in that, then you won't pick one thing, and then you won't start. It's best to just don't worry too much. Just pick one thing, start doing it, and then you'll notice if it is the right thing. If not, then you'll deviate and do a different thing, you know. But you got to pick one and start. Like, otherwise you just get caught up in the anxiety of, well, I don't know if this is going to be right or this is going to be right. Just get one, get moving, and then make a decision.
Because I've got a problem with big perfection issue. Not with everything, but some stuff. Anything I'm creating like this right now is I just want perfection. And someone told me once, perfection is like a barrier to progress. So sometimes you just got to take the leap and just do to try and progress to get it moving. That's it.
Mate, I've got a podcasting studio set up over here. I've never done an episode in my life, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'll move up to the Goldie and I'll start using that one. I've got a few questions from the listeners, and some I like to do with some of the guests that come on, who are obviously fans as well, and they're just short, sharp ones. Biggest ride you've ever done in terms of feet?
I think it'd be like in the 60-foot range off a wave called Jaws off Maui.
Can we just get clarity on how big 60 foot is? That's huge. What are we talking?
I don't know. What's like 8-9 feet is a story. So
that is some frightening shit.
If you went off like 6-7 stories,
I'll stick to watching it on YouTube, I reckon. And then what about Sammy Carson says, tell him his new documentary is inspiring, and what's his favorite wave?
Thanks, Sammy. And my favorite wave, probably Shipstone's Bluff down in Tasmania. That one or Jaws, the one where I rode the biggest wave I've ridden off Maui.
And the last one, I know we've got two more. Was there ever a time where you were like, okay, well, obviously we've already touched on this, but ever a time where you thought, this might be it. I'm actually going to die here under a wave? Not the one where because the one that I think you rode, you said that was a little bit smaller, but is there one where you've wiped out that you've been okay, but you're like, I'm fucked here?
I felt it once, like being held down underwater, where I was at that point where I was just kind of giving up, and it's like, it's a weird thing when you're holding your breath for that long and then you're like, I'm not going to make it to the top. Once you've held your breath for that long, that's not a panic. Like, it doesn't feel painful anymore. It feels like actually euphoric. And I just had that moment of that, but then I came up to the surface, so
wild.
That was probably the closest, and honestly, dying in the ocean, that's not like a focus that I have that often. I don't feel like I'm going to die in big waves. I can get concerned about injury, but not, there's enough safety equipment, amazing, people. I do enough training that I don't feel like I'm going to die, touch wood.
And the very, very last one is, have you had any shark encounters? I think everyone's afraid of sharks. So have you had any big shark encounters? I know a good friend, Mick Fanning, he had his one not that long ago, and that was pretty frightening to see. So anything that jumps out at you that you've seen over the years?
I was with Richie Vass down in South Oz when I saw a great white that looked like the size of a bus breach out of the water, but it was probably like a kilometer away from us, all that, like 500 meters away from us. So
Still
it
too
wasn't like
close.
paying us attention, but I was still that scared. I pretty much ran on water and scaled the jagged rock cliff face to get out of the water. Yeah, I'm absolutely terrified of sharks. So.
Definitely don't blame me there. I think we all are. But Mark, mate, I really appreciate you coming on, and by far my favorite episode. Just feels like I could have talked to you for 3 hours straight, but I think the listeners will get a lot out of it, and your story's quite amazing and inspiring. And it's like I said, it's a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you enjoyed it too. And looking forward for the borders opening and get some surfing in as well. So thank you very much, Mark. They're great to have you on 5 o'clock somewhere.
Too easy, mate. I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully when the borders open up, we can do episode 2 face to face somewhere. Maybe
in your studio.
Here.
That's
We'll have the inaugural first episode.
All right, lock it in, guys.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much, team, and everyone listening. Episode 10, big milestone for the show, and keep on listening. We've got plenty to come. There's a few more big episodes to come, so share it, follow it, subscribe. And episodes are out every 2 weeks, guys. So 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm your host, Taylor Stone. This has been episode 10 with Mark Mathews.
Thanks, Taylor. See you, mate.
Cheers, mate.